Morning, everybody, and welcome to everybody who is logging in whatever time zone you're in. My name is Samir Khan. I'm here with the MasterCard Foundation, and we'd like to welcome you to this morning's webinar, which is about how we can use digital technology to help create better educational opportunities and economic opportunities for young people. We have a great panel, but before I do, I'll just run over a bit of the agenda. Well, first, I'd like to introduce our panelists. I have with me Marlon Parker, who's the founder of RLabs. I have Chandra Pujati, digital coordinator, learning coordinator from Aflatoun International. We have Brooke DiPetrillo, manager and project and grants team from ChildFund International. We have Kathy Duran, director of Africa operations from Digital Opportunity Trust, and Lisa Glenn, Curriculum and Learning Experiences Manager at Arizona State University. So I will just quickly run over what we're going to cover today. We will begin by having short presentations from our distinguished panelists. Afterwards, we'll have a short panel discussion where we'll kind of surface some of the issues that we hope to raise. And then at the end, we will have an opportunity to field at least some of your questions that you might have collected over the course of this webinar. And so to that end, what I would suggest that you do is that you submit your questions via the chat window on the bottom left-hand corner. Obviously, I doubt we'll be able to get to all of your questions, but we'll try to fit in as many as we can. We will be picking the best, so choose your questions wisely. It's hard to crack jokes on webinars when you can't hear people laughing, but that's okay. Okay, so what are we here to talk about? Young people face a number of critical challenges to access education, skills, and opportunities for collaboration so that they can really reach their full social and economic potential. So today, we're going to be focusing on how digital technology, because there's been a lot of talk about digital technology in the development space, what it can do to help create more educational and economic opportunities for young people, particularly for disadvantaged young people. So, as I mentioned before, in recent years, there's been a lot of discussion about this topic, particularly as a rapid increase in the number of tools, technologies, approaches, businesses that have been created and designed to engage young people. So today we're going to hear from a variety of people who are experimenting with digital technology and are on the frontiers of this very topic. And maybe what I'll do then is turn it over to Marlon, who is the founder of RLabs, and he's going to be leading the discussion with a presentation about what RLabs is and what they do.
Thank you so much. Hello to all the listeners, and looking forward to hearing some of the questions as well. So I think, firstly, starting with RLabs, one of our big focus areas has always been around, can we actually use and leverage technology to transform the communities that we work in? So most of the communities that we focus on is specifically geared in marginalized communities, and a large portion, especially in South Africa, we have a lot of young people that are unemployed. And some of the challenges that we found in addressing the challenge of youth unemployment, I mean, it's such a complex issue. You know, there's the skills mismatch. There's the thing about actually actively seeking for a job that is very expensive. At the same time, a lot of young people don't have the experience that's needed to access the appropriate jobs. And one of the things that we really kind of started looking at the different challenges was, which of these things could we actually use technology for? I think it's important to note that you cannot use technology to solve all problems. I mean, that's fundamentally the truth. So for us, the two clear things that we then saw, the opportunity we saw was, one, potentially we can use technology to give young people access to the things they need to find a job. In other words, if they're looking for a job, they might need transportation fees, they might need to have access to toiletries, there's things such as connectivity, being able to call up for an interview. So what we've done is we've actually done some work in creating a platform called Zlato that allows young people to create this value. So it means that they can actually do things in their communities and then leverage that value to access things that they need to find jobs. So our approach that we took was firstly starting with realizing that the young people itself, they are actually the asset. So what they do on the Zlato platform is they would actually we encourage them to do good work. So yes, we might have a shortage of jobs, but there's no shortage of work in our communities. Every single day we see in our communities, there are places that needs a cleanup. You have some organizations or NGOs that need someone to come and volunteer. And for a lot of young people, they don't see that as a job. So we were trying to see, can we actually begin to change the narrative where they can start focusing on what are the things that they can actually do in their local communities. One, that will gain them some work experience. And we call it that we've created this kind of digital work asset. And that is the asset that they can share with possible employers when they're applying for jobs, or alternatively, if they're looking at accessing opportunities around get small business loans, they can actually now show this is work that we've done within the field that we've got an interest in. And that notion of being able to do good work, we then reward them with Zlato, which is a digital rewards. They call it a digital currency, but it's actually more like a digital reward system that we've created that they actually can store it in their mobile wallet. So with this value now, they can now access things that they need whenever they're looking for a job. So the thing that we've done through partnerships, that means we've now actually enabled these young people to now start transacting with dignity. In other words, a young girl can now actually go into a retail store and using their mobile phone, they can go and purchase some sanitary towels. And they can even go to a local medical doctor and access private healthcare. And all of these things are things that we felt are important that young people might need in order to access and actively seek employment. And partners were more than happy to work with us to enable these young people to redeem these rewards. On the one side, for many of these corporate companies, they can now see that the work that the young people have done in the communities is now directly linked to their kind of corporate social responsibility for some of these vendors. At the same time, like I've mentioned, not only are they able to transact with the digital rewards, they're now also able to use that work experience aspect when they're applying for jobs. So it does change a little bit. It does bring changes to their resume or their CV whenever they apply for jobs. Because in order for them to access these digital rewards, we confirm the actual work that they've done. So they've got reference work and they've got visual proof that they've done the work. So main takeaway around any technology or anyone pursuing to develop technology for creating opportunities for young people, I think the main thing that you need to remember is you have to keep youth at the center of your development. Don't kind of separate your technology, your development from the young people itself. And at the same time, you have to consider inclusivity, thinking about those that are not able to access these technologies and finding ways and mechanisms of how your technology solution can actually improve the livelihoods of these young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. I'd like to hold, we will have an opportunity to ask a few more questions about the model and some of your experiences. But before we do, I'll turn it over to Chandra Padyati, who's from Aflatoun International.
Thank you. I would like to kick off the presentation with the stories. This is in Venezuela. Aflatoun is part of a social project of the University of Carabobo, working with rural youth, supporting their social and financial projects in the community. In these stories, the youth are working together and innovating their sports center. And in Syria, Aflatoun is part of the program providing psycho support to youth affected by conflict. In these stories, a group of youth is working together in cleaning the neglected school in the city center. So the Aflatoun program is aimed to provide young people an opportunity to engage with the world around them by taking action locally and think globally. This is an overview of stories and projects that has been shared by youth. Aflatoun program is developed by Aflatoun International. Aflatoun is a network organization of 113 countries that supports social and financial education for children and youth. We provide training service in delivering our learning materials using child-centered approach, putting children in the center of their learning. Our materials are translated and contextualized in 5 languages. The material is based on the 5 core elements of personal understanding, right and responsibility, saving and spending, planning and budgeting, and conducting enterprises projects. We conduct research and evaluation studies on the effectiveness of the program, and to date, we are reaching 4 million children. To build the financial skill and confidence, Aflatoun teaches youth about saving and spending, planning and budgeting. Through this, done through activity-based learning with youth planning and implementing social projects and money-making enterprises. Aflatoun's program provides the opportunity and tools for youth to take part in a group activity. Together, they elicit ideas and conduct projects that bring positive change in their community. In addition to face-to-face group workshop activities, each individual youth could have continuous access to learning materials. They can use their own time and their own pace using Aflatoun Digital. Aflatoun Digital is an online platform that can be used as a complementary to the Aflatoun program or combined with other already existing programs. The modules are designed in a multimedia format such as short videos, interactive quizzes. Each user would have their own account where their learning journey are captured on a progress bar with point systems using gamification approach, and to share their stories and experiences of their projects to the platform. On the story gallery, participants can also vote on stories they find inspiring. So early this year, we conducted a research study on a database from Aflatoun Digital using linear regression models in understanding to what extent participants affect social and financial outcomes. And the studies indicate that positive outcomes on social awareness associated with understanding rights and responsibilities, knowing their rights, respecting the rights of others, and promoting the rights in the community. The digital learning offers possibilities and challenges. To date, there are 25,000 registered users and 300 news stories from 20 countries. This is a data set from Google Analytics from the period of when the platform was launched in October 2013 to date. The mountain peaks respond from the youth participants to the event hosted by the Aflatoun International. The two small mountains are from the annual Aflatoun Youth Project competition that are aligned with the global money. The tallest peak is from a project competition that is conducted earlier this year on entrepreneurship competition for youth in Latin America. And this event is a cross-sectoral collaboration with Viacom and Scotiabank Latin America through the MTV online and on-air channel in promoting the competition. Moving forward, we will be continuing to support our implementing partners in Ecuador and Syria, and also linking the stories that we gather from the group of youth to the theory of change to improve our learning outcomes, and to further support and facilitate the teachers in delivering the program. And as the next phase of the project, we have developed in collaboration with Kraket Foundation a mobile web app that is functioning to deliver content and support facilitator, and we'll be implementing this project together with our partners in Ghana and Nigeria. Thank you. Just to conclude, this is a word cloud of stories that we learn and gather from you as a reflection of their experiences using Aflatoun Digital.
Great. Thank you very much, Chandra. I noticed that we are beginning to get some questions, so please do keep them coming, and we'll try to keep a running tab and see what we can address based on the conversation that comes afterwards. I'd like to turn things over now to Brooke DiPetrillo, who is Manager of Project and Grants at ChildFund International.
Great, thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the MasterCard Foundation for hosting this webinar. So just a little bit of background about ChildFund International. We are a child-focused international development organization, and we're currently working in 27 different countries. And the diagram depicted here is our theory of change. We take a life stage approach to improving the well-being of infants, children, and youth through all their developmental milestones as they age. The project that I am going to be presenting today is called the Zambia Nurses and Life Skills Training Project in partnership with the MasterCard Foundation. I'd like to just set the country context as to why this project was designed and developed. So a little bit about Zambia. In Zambia, there is currently a shortage of nurses. So there isn't even a full nurse per 1,000 people in Zambia. And I've showed some comparative rates for Canada and Switzerland just to show you how many nurses they have per 1,000 people. In addition to a lack of healthcare professionals to meet the healthcare needs of Zambians, there's also a very high unemployment rate for youth in Zambia. It's currently at 25%. And what I haven't showed here is that youth also comprise a very large percentage of the population. So if you're looking at a population pyramid, about half, 50% of the population are youth. So there's an opportunity here to support the training of nurses and to create jobs for youth in the field of nursing. So our model, so the project that we are piloting and currently in the process of piloting, is a 5-year project, and we are about to approach the 5th and final year. We have 2 main objectives, and that is to expand the capacity of government nurse training schools so that they can be able to enroll more students. So right now, the structure of these schools is that they can only enroll students if they can physically board. So they must have room and board or beds for students, and that provides a limitation so that these schools can only enroll students when they have the space for them. So we would like to introduce, or what we're aiming to introduce to this pilot initiative, is an e-learning platform so that students don't have to physically be present. They can still access and learn and conduct the exact same standardized curriculum as other students using an e-learning platform or a learning management system. Our second objective is to create employment opportunities for nurses, specifically in the public health system. The government has indicated that they have available positions. This year alone, the Ministry of Health will be posting 5,000 advertisements for public health positions. In addition to that, they're also building 650 rural health posts. So there are opportunities for youth to find employment in the field of nursing as long as they can be trained. Our core activities involve adapting the existing accredited nursing curriculum to an e-learning platform, equipping the schools with computer labs and networking those computer labs. And we've also included a life skills and a scholarships component. I'll speak more about the life skills in the next one. And the scholarships component is to encourage disadvantaged or marginalized youth that meet the academic qualifications but cannot afford to pay for the application or tuition fees, to encourage them to apply, especially in some of the rural areas where they're hoping to work. And the overall intended impact is to, by the end of this project, train at least 2,000 young people as registered nurses, improve student performance, expand the capacity and the ability of government nursing institutions to train more nurses, and to really transform how nursing education can be administered in Zambia using the e-learning platform. So some of the unique elements of our program is that it's pre-service. So we're trying to capture youth right as they graduate from high school. These are youth that have very little or zero work experience. The course content is standardized, so we are using an accredited nursing curriculum, and we have converted this to an interactive, self-directed e-learning platform. And then another exciting element is this integrated and enhanced life skills component. So in addition to the accredited technical content, these students are also learning critical life skills like conflict resolution, negotiation, resilience, coping, time management, job and career planning. And this component has been so successful that the Ministry of Health and General Nursing Council, the oversight body, have actually made it standardized that all registered nurses learn life skills, not just the students that are enrolled in our component. So we do have some opportunities. The Ministry of Health has been an excellent partner and stakeholder since the inception of this project, and they are currently in discussions right now on assessing how all nurses will be trained using this blended approach. So that's a combination of access to these e-learning modules for some of the technical content, and then face-to-face for some of the more practical lab work, work on the wards, and some of those skills that have to be done face-to-face or with the support of a principal tutor or a mentor. So right now, the 11 pilot schools that we're working with are administering this blended approach with an e-learning cohort are learning technical content for year 1 and some of year 2 using this e-learning platform. And then there's a parallel cohort of regular students. So what we're hoping to do is in the future, all 16 government schools will be using this blended approach through a policy that the Ministry of Health will be administering, which is called the blended approach policy. So we're hoping to really transform this system. Some of the challenges is that it did take a long time to standardize all of the content. We have a number of stakeholders who are working with a variety of different government nursing institutions, and so that took some time. So if anyone out there is considering using or adapting a current curriculum, just make sure that you budget appropriately for timing. It did also take some time to recruit and advertise to students. There was some skepticism in the beginning that maybe this e-learning process wasn't of the same caliber as a regular or traditional pedagogical approach of having the face-to-face. There's been, it took a long time to reinforce and make sure that the computer labs on campus had sufficient support and that the students had access to them. There's the typical frequent turnover within the government, so we've lost and gained some champions along the way, and there's just a tremendous amount of stakeholders which are vital to this project. But as many of you can imagine, many people in the room means many different opinions and values and belief systems. But some of the key learnings that we're really proud of is that we're starting to see a little bit of a transformation that the nursing field, which is traditionally female, is starting to generate some more interest among males. And anecdotally, we believe that's because of the technology component, but we're hoping that our inline can validate that. The life skills component has been very successful, and we do have some quantitative and qualitative data to show that the students that in the e-learning cohort have been able to demonstrate improved communication skills, that they are better able to manage their time. The teachers and tutors have commented that e-learners tend to be more proactive, they're problem solvers, and that they're better at managing and coping with stress. The stakeholder and steering committee structure was vital to this model, to have so many different people engaged and helping to make decisions really from year 1 of the planning year. And finally, that transformation and change is possible as an unintended outcome of this project is this policy shift where all government schools will be using a blended approach, not just the ones that are engaged in this project. And so this is the final slide. And so programmatic direction is we hope in this final year to continue to build the capacity of our partners in the Ministry of Health and General Nursing Council, which is the oversight body for all of the government and nursing institutions. We will be focusing on transition and handover. So the Ministry of Health and General Nursing Council will take this over. We'd also like to document. We'll be conducting some more qualitative and quantitative research to hopefully capture some new learning. And then we'd love to be able to follow up with our first graduate cohort to see where they are placed in employment after they complete their coursework. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Brooke. I'd now like to turn things over to Kathy Durand, Director of Africa Operations at Digital Opportunity Trust.
Great, thanks, Samir. And thank you to the MasterCard Foundation and all of you who are watching this video for the opportunity to share a bit of what DOT is doing in the area of digital technology and lifelong learning. I'm going to talk today from the perspective of how DOT as an organization is facilitating youth digital engagement, and not so much from a project perspective, but from an overarching approach that we integrate throughout programs. So digital engagement is about lifelong learning as it transcends training and looks at how young people are using technology to network, to access resources and new ideas, and to develop their own ideas of how to be social innovators and leaders in their community. So at DOT, to tell you a little bit about who we are, we run programs around the areas of youth leadership and youth livelihoods. And DOT as an organization believes strongly in the power of youth-led innovation. And we believe that communities can be shaped by empowering youth to create sustainable initiatives inspired by community needs. And we believe that this social innovation is accelerated when supported by digital technology. And as others on this panel have already said, it's really important to us that we note that the technology, the digital technology, is not the solution. It's not the silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems, but we do believe that it plays an important role in addressing many of the challenges that young people are facing in their communities. So, although we are here today really talking about digital technology, I wanted to situate my part of the conversation in a more overarching approach to learning. So at DOT, we are interested in creating lifelong learners, which is a mindset that can be supported through both digital tools and in-person training. So at DOT, we have three main components to our approach. The first is experiential learning. We believe that young people learn by doing, and that we can do this through face-to-face learning where they go into their communities, they work with partners, they deliver DOT programs, but also online, we can do this by creating spaces for people to share their ideas and get feedback on those ideas. All of DOT programs use a peer-to-peer learning methodology. So young people are training other young people in their communities around entrepreneurship, empowerment skills, life skills, and technology skills. And by doing this, what we find is that the results of the learning are really increased because young people really understand better when they're hearing from other young people. They speak the same language, the young people are more up to date on what things are happening. And it's really easy, it's much easier for a young person to go into a community, into an organization and build trust and build networks and share their experience. These young people that are facilitating DOT programs are important role models in the community so that other young people in their communities who are a bit more marginalized can see people from the communities they came from achieving and doing this type of thing. And then lastly, leadership skills. So leadership skills are an important part of young people being able to develop the resilience that allows them to negotiate the obstacles and the challenges in the context in which they operate. So what we found from some recent research is that all young people, even the successful ones, are hitting different walls of adversity in their communities. And what the resilient skills that they're learning in DOT does is it enables them to work around and adapt to the challenges that they face. So in terms of transformative leaders, these are some of the skills that we think that transformative leaders need. They need vision, they need communication skills, and they need self-innovation. So all of the people that come into DOT programs, they self-select. They're there because they want to be there. They've registered. We don't pay any per diems or anything like that to get people there. And we compete with a lot of programs and communities that do pay per diems. And so when people come, they really want to be there, and they're there because they see the value and they've heard about the value from other people in their communities. I think at DOT, the technology piece is not just it's not just the content of what we're sharing with young people, but like others who have spoken here, it's the how that we're doing it. It's the how we support young leaders to deliver programs in communities, as well as skills that they're training their peers in their communities to be able to have. So in terms of our platform, I wouldn't say that we have any one platform that we're using at DOT. What we're doing is it depends really on the objective of what you want to achieve. So if you have a specific objective, then you need to go to a specific platform. But when it's digital engagement and the objective is really to get young people talking and sharing their experience, we found it's more useful to go where youth already are. So we're looking at providing learning opportunities and engagement on social media and tools that are mobile accessible, affordable, and already in the hands of youth. So we can focus on what we're talking about and what youth are talking about, and not on trying to convince them to come to a separate place where they're not already. We're also very interested in youth as creators of locally relevant content. I'll come back to this later on, but one of the biggest challenges is there isn't enough locally relevant content, and that's one of the reasons that people don't make that choice to spend some of their small income on technology. If it's not relevant, then they're not going to go there. So last year, we undertook a digital research project that was led by a team of 19 young researchers across 7 countries and who interviewed 580 youth. What was important about this piece of research was that it was done by the young people, and the focus, the entire sample was young people. So in terms of where youth are, and we really focused on what access and use of technology. So in Africa, 90% of internet access occurs on a mobile phone, which has huge implications for those of us in terms of how we're developing platforms and learning opportunities. And job searches and learning are happening on social media networks. This next slide shows some of the findings from that research study. I'm not necessarily going to get into the details, but a couple of interesting things is that 42% are learning on Google, 21% on Facebook, and only 1% have done a paid online course. So providing content through these other tools and so that it's easily accessible is really important to reach youth. The other thing that's not shown in this data set, but that we found is important, was the research that we did with youth reinforced the gender gap that exists and that shows up in research done on adults. So not only from the access side, but also from the use side, women are using technology differently than men. So for instance, of those who are using technology for entrepreneurship purposes, only 7% of that user group was women. And so this poses a significant challenge for us that we're looking at now in more depth so that we can understand what is causing that gap. So again, in this study, you consistently say that affordability and locally relevant content are the most significant barriers to taking advantage of opportunities. And this quote from Evans in Tanzania really sums it up. He says, when I want to learn about entrepreneurship, there's nothing online that is about how to do it in my community. There's nothing in his language, and there's nothing about what does it look like in Dar es Salaam, in Moshi, to start an enterprise or a social innovation project. So in terms of DOT, when we're defining our programs and the way that we want to reach youth, we want to emphasize the value and the importance of tools youth are already using. So when platforms are needed for program implementation, we're ensure they're compatible with the tools, again, that youth are already using. So for instance, we can use WhatsApp for coaching, for virtual coaching, and we can use it as a way to push out information to people who have already taken our programs, which gives us a way to keep in touch with people. As we know, youth are highly mobile, and it's difficult to maintain that connection over longer periods of time. And the other thing is, of course, as we've talked about, is blended learning. So digital tools and engagement plus face-to-face learning opportunities. And like many others in this space, we're trying to figure out what is the right blend between that. What are the things that are better done face-to-face, and what are the things that can be done using mobile tools. Cool. So what we're finding through the digital engagement component of our program is that by engaging in these online forums, young people are becoming experts in how to use the digital tools available to them to create opportunities. And one of the things we're very interested in is not how to train young people on specific applications, but how to help them develop the ability to look at different applications and pick the one that is the most relevant for them. We're looking at strong and widespread networks on social media. We have a very large DOT Facebook group, but there's probably just as many users in their own Facebook group. So each cohort of young leaders in a country sets up their own Facebook group. We're not a part of it. We know that they exist, but it's their social network and their peer group. Youth are beginning and contributing to a content ecosystem of local contents. And again, this is going to be extremely important for all of us as we want to promote digital adoption. Because if the relevance isn't there, then the young people and the women are not going to be there. And also, as I started with, digital engagement is a way to support lifelong learning of youth. It doesn't require a specified time for young people to be there. It's very much driven by their own interests and their own, and really amplifies their ability to be global citizens and leaders in their communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kathy. We're very happy to be seeing all the questions that are coming up on the chat bot. We encourage you to keep on going. Just by way, some of the questions I think are about how people can access the presentation in the webinar. And so, as we said in the chat, we will be making a recording of the webinar available at a later time, and we'll be in touch about that. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to turn things over to Lisa Glenn from Arizona State University.
Great, thank you so much. I am happy to get to share with you today about the Scholars Community Platform named Baobab. This initiative, which was built in collaboration with the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program, provides tertiary level MasterCard Foundation scholars with a place to build their knowledge, their scholars community, and their professional network. The MasterCard Foundation believes that the value of the scholars program is really in the network scholars to transform Africa. And so this network experience, this social learning network, allows scholars to be able to experience that more directly. So by 2023, the MasterCard Foundation will enable 30,000 scholars to study around the globe on full ride secondary or tertiary scholarships. This is a huge commitment to the education of sub-Saharan African students by the MasterCard Foundation. And with the goal of transforming transforming Africa, these students will study at over 25 partner institutions on multiple continents worldwide. The MasterCard Foundation and Arizona State University aim to support scholars in their work to transform the continent by providing a connection to the larger scholars community. It's highly unlikely that all 30,000 scholars will know each other. It's almost impossible. It is impossible. And so Baobab is providing a social learning network where scholars can build on their personal and professional networks, both at home and abroad. So after a year of planning, the Scholars Community Platform is now live. We launched in mid-October. The platform has been created consistently with input from the experiences of scholars in order to make sure that it's a platform designed for scholar success. It's being continuously developed using an iterative, human-centered design process in which the scholar experience is valued above everything else. We're well aware of the challenges that plague digital tools if they're not created in collaboration with the user and with the user in mind. So we've developed this solution in partnership with our users from the beginning. We will continue to develop the platform over the next 5 years, responding to user needs and trends as we go. So to give you a sense of the vision of the platform, we want to make sure that the platform facilitates learning around soft skills. Repeatedly, we hear that soft skills is one of the most important areas of personal and professional development that is lacking in employees. And so we want to be sure that that is a central focus of Baobab. Additionally, providing access to resources. So once scholars begin their educational journey, they want to continue upon that track and continue professionally. Baobab assists by providing opportunities to support scholars along their educational journeys, both in school and beyond, including educational resources, as well as opportunities such as jobs, internships, and fellowships. We want to maximize professional connections through mentorship. So we provide mentorship opportunities through a one-to-many digital mentorship model. It's a very unusual model, and we are interested in its results. So mentors come from all over the African continent and beyond and represent a variety of career backgrounds and phases. Once scholars are on Baobab, they have access for life, not just while they are a scholar. So providing them with ongoing mentorship, both through their educational career and into their professional lives, will ensure that they receive the support that they receive support that they need at the times they most need it. And finally, we want to ensure that it increases potential by fostering collaboration. So the goal of Baobab is to help scholars transform Africa through transitions, transformative leadership, give back initiatives, and mentorship. By focusing on these areas of personal development in individual scholars, the MasterCard Foundation is ensuring future personal and professional success. Since this is a panel on providing educational opportunities, I wanted to show you our learning dashboard. So scholars can browse courses, which are broad topic areas made up of lessons that teach a specific skill or concept. These lessons are focused on supporting scholars in their journey to transform Africa through giving back, learning transformative leadership skills and mindsets, and working on professional competencies. Completing lessons will unlock and award progress on different badges. As you can see, each badge represents a soft skill that's highly desirable for scholars, both in terms of professional and personal success, and that corresponds with the MasterCard Foundation's transformative leadership skills. This is a hybrid approach to gamification. It was created in collaboration with scholars to decrease feelings of competition, as a competitive atmosphere can be demotivating in many collectivist communities, and instead it focuses on personal and professional development. So you might be asking yourself, why would Arizona State University be involved in this? We're not exactly the player that you think of in developing tools for sub-Saharan Africans, but as you can see, the mission that is listed on the slide is highly in alignment with the MasterCard Foundation's mission, and our capability to offer digital solutions at scale has sort of paved the way for ASU to be the selected partner to build Baobab. We believe in education at scale for everyone, and this value has really inculcated everything that we do, and so it's highly in alignment with the Foundation's goals. Some of the lessons learned that have been critical to our success have been the elevated value of research and evaluation. So throughout the development of the platform, scholars have been viewed as the experts. So as I mentioned before, we've consistently worked to ensure that Baobab serves the needs of scholars in the most comprehensive way possible. We also use an iterative design process in the creation of the platform to ensure we're hitting the right features and proof points for users as we go. And this human-centered design doesn't stop just at the design of the platform. So we've used an iterative human-centered design model for creation of all content on Baobab. This means that we elicit scholar feedback in every step of curriculum development in order to ensure that scholars receive the most value from each piece of learning on this site. So for example, we would start with scholar insights on what they might want to learn. We would develop learning objectives and then elicit feedback on those objectives. Then we would develop pieces of content. We would test that content with users, elicit their feedback, develop anything else we needed to, going on to individual modules and lessons, and so forth. So as you can see, my job gets really complicated because there's not actually a final product ever. But we believe that that will best serve the needs of scholars as our scholar population changes and adapts, and as trends and needs change and adapt. So our biggest lessons learned are around engagement. Throughout the process, we've worked hard to ensure that we're learning continuously from our users, and we've learned that scholars are very different, which is no surprise, considering that they hail from 33 different countries, not to mention different digital experiences, religious and educational backgrounds, and more. So there are a number of motivational factors that we have to address with scholars in order to ensure engagement. To increase engagement, we've worked to personalize communication by mentioning specific scholars when at all possible. We do have the functionality to tag scholars. That makes that a little bit easier. We've also employed community managers who are current scholars so that they can bolster engagement in the community and help increase community feel through posting and commenting. Additionally, scholars seem to be most driven by professional development opportunities. So we've worked to gain those through mentors, the MasterCard Foundation, partners, and more. The challenges we've found have been the barrier to entry and time availability. So for example, scholars are less likely to engage in anything if an additional click is required. So we are reducing as many clicks as we can to remedy high barriers to entry or to posting. Additionally, scholars only spend about 10 minutes on average on Baobab. So all of our content needs to be easily accessible in under 10 minutes. For those of you who are educators in the audience, you can imagine developing content on everything you need to know about being an entrepreneur in less than 10 minutes. So we are really working on innovative ways to ensure that that time is respected. Additionally, our user engagement is highly dependent on the engagement of other groups, MasterCard Foundation partners, mentors, other scholars. We have the same challenge that Airbnb or Uber had when they began. So an Airbnb, you need bookings, and in Uber you need riders, but at the same time you need renters and you need drivers. And so we have to really work consistently to identify how to drive engagement within each group so that we can drive scholar engagement. And finally, we began the process with exclusively African content. All case studies were African, all examples are African, but we have seen that scholars are pretty global minded and they're highly responsive to content from other backgrounds. This is likely because they're also studying in many other backgrounds. And so we're gradually including a bit more content from communities that have similar values and challenges. So finally, our next step is that we want to drive the most important content or network connections to each individual. We are working on our most important functionality, which is called Content Finds the User, which is exactly what it sounds like. Content will come to you based on your attributes. So we're excited to create algorithms which will drive the best content to each user to the top of his or her feed, ensuring that what's the most important content for each scholar in that 10-minute window is what they see first. We anticipate being able to direct scholars to librarians to ask for help finding resources that are important to them. It is absolutely beyond the scope of our team to provide information on things like animal husbandry. And so we want to empower scholars to find the content that they need. Additionally, identifying the best content for scholars based on their demographics. So for example, their age or their institution, their major, so that, for example, they might be a freshman in college and receive information on how to choose a major that's relevant to a freshman. Additionally, we want to be able to crowdsource content to create more relevant lessons. So as has been mentioned multiple times, local content is very important. And so we're working with scholars to develop that content. And finally, allowing scholars to demonstrate their skills to employers. So we will be working with MasterCard Foundation employer partners and others to determine how we can really best use Baobab as a tool to drive scholar employment. So we look forward to seeing how MasterCard Foundation scholars will transform Africa, and we believe we're just the social learning network to help them do that.
Great. Thank you very much. So I want to thank everybody, first of all, for very fascinating presentations of the work that you're involved in. And maybe what I'll do is start with a kind of an overarching statement, and maybe if you wanted to weigh in on the question I want to pose to you. So, you know, each implementation described in this panel offers, you know, a different configuration of an online learning platform or an approach that incorporates some aspect of a technological solution. So reflecting on your experiences so far, to what extent is this kind of a means to an end, or versus seeing the technology as kind of an intervention as an end in itself? So, I mean, my basic question is, are we doing technology just for its own sake, or is there a particular value add that it brings to what you're trying to do that is worth isolating? So does anyone have any thoughts about that very broad question?
I would say in the case of Baobab and the Scholars Network, we really needed to create a tool to connect all of the scholars. They're studying in multiple different countries on different continents. They may never meet in person. And for the MasterCard Foundation to create a cadre of leaders that is going to sort of transform the African continent, they need to know each other. And there's no way for them to do that in their university silos. And so creating a tool that would connect all of them directly was the best approach.
And this is work with ChildFund, I would just say too that for our project, for the Zambia Nurses and Life Skills Training Project, we had a very specific need, and so the technology, adapting curriculum and offering an e-learning platform for registered nurses was a solution to a specific curriculum. So in that respect, maybe it is the end. However, what we're seeing is that, in particular in the healthcare field, that technology in some ways is just the beginning. And what we're seeing is that students that are now computer literate or have advanced computer skills or technology skills as a result of participating in this project are saying that they feel that they're benefiting more than if they didn't have access to tablets and computers, and that students that are not enrolled in the e-learning platform are actually coming to the e-learners for support on helping to type papers, on do a Google search for research. So, and as many of us are seeing in our own countries, the healthcare industry is embracing technology. So we're moving from paper-based medical records to electronic medical records. So in that particular aspect, I think that technology is just the beginning, and that, the more that we can introduce elements of technology, not everything has to be technology-based, but the more that we can be strategic and deliberate about introducing technology, then that is a very specific skill set that we're building in young people, not just for what the current endeavor is, but also for their future growth and to make them, more desirable to a variety of different employers.
This is Marlon from RLabs. I think just to add to that, I think we need the reality is that technology is an extension of many young people on the continent. Wherever you go, you see them having access to mobile devices. Even some of the most remote places where I've traveled, I've actually seen young people, either if they don't have it, they have access to it in some form or the other. And at the same time, these kind of technologies are actually influencing young people. So if we are looking at kind of developing tools, we're looking at how we kind of best ensure that young people become economically empowered and have access to the appropriate skills. If we not going to leverage the power of technology, I think we're definitely kind of missing the boat. It's not the end all. I'm a firm believer that you have to kind of only use technology if you really have to. Don't kind of push technology down every single solution. In our case, we only started building the actual mobile application after the realization that young people actually, the thing about having dignity and being able to walk into a shop to go and buy something that you need in order to go for the job interview. Maybe you need a new shirt, or you maybe just need to get you some deodorant so you could at least kind of take away a bit of the smell, whatever the case might be. Instead of kind of just giving them standing in lines and kind of pushing it out as a handout, we were very much about, can we create a mechanism instead of giving them real cash to actually enable them to access something with dignity. And technology enabled that simply because a lot of the partners we work with, they already have these kind of little mobile payment stores that we can integrate into. So I think technology should be, once you understand your systems and your process and what you want to do in your intervention or your solution, then you kind of begin to look at what part of what you're doing can you use technology to do it a bit more efficiently. Don't just kind of jump on the technology bandwagon and hoping that people come to your and use your technology or platform.
I just wanted to add that I think it's a really important question that we need to keep asking ourselves, because it's really easy to get caught up in the technology because it's shiny and it's flashy and it's fun. But I think we all, what everyone's saying and we agree on is there's a reason for it, whether it's equipping nurses with the skills and having more nurses out there available in Zambia, or having young people being able to access job opportunities and see their worth. I think, but continually asking ourselves that question, what are we doing it? The same way we would ask ourselves, why are we giving out microcredit, or why are we doing training? And figuring out that balance, where does technology work and where does it not work? Who does it work for and who does it not work for? And that's an important part of the question as well, because it doesn't work. It's not neutral. It doesn't work the same for everyone. And if we think that if we go in thinking that it does, I think we're doing people a disservice.
Did you want to? You okay?
So just to amplify the discussion point as well, we believe in the organization that technology amplify the already existing programs that we have. So what we learn from Aflatoun International is that we see a lot of stories from youth and young people across the globe. And what technology does in our program is collected all of these stories. And for example, a youth in Indonesia can see what other young people in Syria are doing. So it's connecting all of these stories and inspiring each other. So it becomes an additional part of the program.
So I'm going to ask actually each of our panelists a particular question, but we're again focusing on things that are broadly applicable to the larger group and the larger conversation we're trying to start. So Kathy, I'm interested how you've experienced or how Dada's experienced this kind of interplay between technology, pedagogy, and capacity. So are the capacities of your trainers and your students and the pedagogies that are designed to assist them in alignment with the technologies that are available? And if not, how can you improve on these technologies to account for challenges that might happen across the DOT network?
So in DOT, we really have two main target audiences. So we have our young leaders who tend to be graduates who are unemployed or who are really significantly underemployed. And they're really looking for that work experience, but they're a little bit more educated and their literacy levels and exposure to different ideas is different. And then we have our other beneficiary, our other target group, who is the youth who the young leaders train and empower, and they tend to be more marginalized. They tend to have more basic levels of education. And so we really, when we look at answering that question, it really depends on who we're talking about, and it's constantly evolving. So, you know, I've been with DOT for 6 years, and I've just seen, I go to the region fairly regularly, and every time I go, I see massive improvements in access. And so we're constantly pushing ourselves to be ahead of the curve in terms of what's available. Sometimes we're ahead, sometimes we're online with the curve, because it is changing so fast, the technology. I think what you do with technology is going to be really important in terms of aligning it with your target audience. So, you know, we would provide different resources and different ways of engaging with different target groups. Youth are not a homogeneous group. And so you really need to look at their needs and their specific ways of interacting. So we would do more, say, with our young leaders who are interns delivering programs and talk more about the basic skill sets that young people are using as our participants in our programs. So for instance, when we started, this is changing a bit, but 40% of people who came to DOT programs had never touched a computer before. And so even the very act of learning how to do that can be very empowering for people, because it's something they never thought that they could do. And so that's changing, of course, with phones and stuff, but it's still really learning how to use it productively, moving from watching, you know, YouTube videos to being able to engage as a change maker, for instance.
Okay, interesting. So maybe I'll turn over to you, Chandra. On that effect, have you been able to, can you describe some of the effects that you're observing on Aflatoun Digital on the social and financial outcomes of young people?
Sure. So based on the research study and the data set of Aflatoun Digital, using the linear regression model in understanding to what extent the participation effect on social and financial outcomes, the study indicates that positive outcomes on social awareness associated with understanding rights and responsibility, knowing their rights, and respecting the rights of others and promoting their rights in the community. And on the financial empowerment, the findings indicate that the participants develop knowledge in applying planning and budgeting tools for setting up their enterprising projects, such as using SWOT analysis and setting up a business plan.
Brooke, maybe I could ask you a little bit about cultural and social norms, and what did you know that you were going to have to overcome in implementing the ChildFund project? And, you know, I guess the question was there resistance from the people that you were working with, either the educators or stakeholders? You know, were there intergenerational differences, different understanding of particular types of technology? And what needed to be altered to incorporate this kind of blended approach?
Thanks, Samir. So yes, initially there were some challenges and some, I think, misperceptions that we had to overcome. Initially, I think people were very skeptical of e-learning, that both learners and stakeholders, and I think even some folks within the Ministry of Health and General Nursing Council questioned whether or not the delivery of technical content through an e-learning platform would be of the same caliber as a tutor delivering content face to face. So that, I think, the way that we overcame that was that stakeholders were involved in every single step of the project, from design, inception, to planning, to standardizing the content, to the look and feel of the e-learning platform. And we invested a lot of time and energy in coaching and training tutors and trainers so that they felt comfortable with the technology and that they understood that it was the exact same technical content that regular students would be receiving. We also had challenges with some of the e-learners. In some of our schools, e-learners were treated differently than traditional or regular learners. They were given different uniforms to wear in some schools, and they were looked upon differently by other students. But I think once our first cohort demonstrated how that they were learning and how they were contributing, I think very quickly the regular students saw the added value and assets that they were missing. And so we did start to, over time, see more gelling between these two streamlines, these two cohorts. So that's the overall, I think, social and cultural nuance. But then there's some early adapters. So there are some schools that really embrace technology right from the beginning. And so a lot of it has to do with the leadership of some of these institutions. If you have in your leadership and in management individuals that are supportive of technology, then they make sure that their staff are supportive of it and receive the support and resources they need. So we realized very early on that we had to be hands-on, and we had to make sure that instructors and tutors felt comfortable with the technology, because that would definitely influence how students perceived the technology. But I think right now the overall perception is that everyone is embracing technology, because it seems like we're moving in the direction that this will be that the blended approach will be standard across all government nurse training institutions. So I think that's really, that kind of transformation is really powerful.
Great, thanks. So maybe I'll turn it over to Marlon. Your model is very interesting, and I was wondering if you could speak to the digital aspect of the technology and its effectiveness in reaching young people who are the most marginalized. Particularly, there is already a question, I think, about how women interact with some of these tools and whether they're engaging differently. But maybe you could speak to the experience of RLabs in reaching those kind of the hardest to reach populations, or populations that are, stereotypically thought of as being the hardest to reach.
Thank you. I mean, in most of our contexts we work in, and that's especially in South Africa as well as in places like Tanzania, Sub-Saharan Africa, we've actually found that it's not so much a problem with having access to the technologies per se, especially mobile technology, but it's actually about the appropriateness of using it. Yes, we do find there are risks involved, especially when young girls are concerned, having these kind of mobile devices sometimes, because the fact that there's at risk of being robbed, etc. But it's very interesting how very creative and innovative these young women are. The other thing in our experience, and it's also just kind of touching on one of the questions from Carden, was we've actually found in a lot of our engagement on the Zlato platform specifically, the mobile digital rewards platform, more than 50% are young women. Our most active users that we have are young women. And it's interesting that for many of them, the way they use these technologies is for self-improvement and enhancement. But secondly, they're also very, very driven to make a difference in the community. Actually, more so than young men in our experience. And for them it's really about the not just a matter of kind of, oh, I'm doing this so I can get rewards. But I'll give you an example. We had some of our young girls using their own digital rewards to buy sanitary towels. And they were using that so they could take these sanitary towels to young girls at an orphanage. So yet they are girls coming from a very difficult and broken homes. And these 2, 3 young girls, what they were doing is they were doing a lot of community work, because we picked up the anomaly that they are highly active in doing community work, and they're only buying sanitary towels. And when we asked them, they said, no, the reason why they're doing it because there's an orphanage of young girls, and they've seen these girls not going to school because of that problem. And here what they did was they're doing this as an outreach. And for me, I've seen that especially in communities where things are very difficult, and I know it was alluded to, that the community members themselves and these young people, they are the problem experts. And I think by giving them the appropriate tools, using technology to give them the opportunity to do some of the things that they would like to do. So maybe they wouldn't have been able to go and buy a sanitary towel because they didn't have the money, but now they can do some good deeds and use that to do something that they always want to do in the community. At the same time, it also increases their value, self-worth, as people are seeing them in the community, as those are the girls that's keeping young girls in school. And I think for me, those are the kind of things that really kind of, where, especially when we're developing technologies, we have to realize that I don't so much think it's just about the access problem. It's just about using these tools appropriately. And again, we've heard about the importance of having the individuals, these young people that you're working with, having them at the center of your design process, of your solution process, and getting them to actually kind of drive it. And so if you can keep that at the center of your thoughts around, especially around inclusivity, around with people in marginalized communities, I think that is the big thing. Yes, and also don't think, oh, it's just an SMS solution. Smartphone penetration is happening at a rapid pace. These are the kind of things that people are aspiring to. They're not aspiring to send a text message. They're aspiring to having a smartphone so that because that for them is a big status symbol as well.
So on that front, I'm going to turn over to Lisa. In discussions like this, there's elegant theory, and then there's the nuts and bolts of practice. And I think we're sort of talking a little bit. I like the notion of thinking about these things to not get caught up in the gawking around the digital aspect, but to really think of these tools and to really actually look about the human behavior that sort of arranges around these tools. I thought maybe I'm curious to hear about how that there's an idea, and then there's the distance between the idea and getting things off the shelf and getting them piloted and implemented, but then also having the ability for them to adapt to new needs as user needs sort of come about. So I'm wondering, Lisa, if you can speak a little bit about the customization process that has come out through the Aboutbaobab.
Sure. So I'd like to touch a little bit on 2 different ways that we have been able to go from idea to practice. The first I alluded to was the gamification elements on the site. So we started with a very traditional gamification approach. You receive points, you get to an extra level, there's sort of like a blingy thing on the side that's like, oh great, you did a great job. We tested that with scholars and they hated it, like really hated it, said I would never use this if you put this in the site. And we had followed literally every best practice in the gamification book in order to create it. And so we were a little bit confused by those responses. And so we really worked on figuring out why they hated that response. And the answer was, we're a collectivist community. We do not want to compete with each other. We don't want to be set up on an individual level to be compared. And, I mean, with my background in sort of African education, it was like, duh, obviously they don't want that. That makes sense on a cultural level. And so how do we adapt gamification culturally to be most relevant for this user group? And even though we have a very broad user group from 33 countries, there are some similarities that run through that. And so we ended up creating a system that is not individually comparative, that shows the scholars' progress, shows their professional and personal development, and gives them sort of a pride point to share with the community and is similar for every scholar. The other piece was something that Marlon alluded to, which was looking at the use of SMS technology versus smartphone technology and online technology. So again, we have a large variety of users, and so we knew that we needed to create a solution that would work for as many users as possible. A lot of our secondary alums who are on the platform have a smartphone but have spotty internet access or very low bandwidth, but then our tertiary scholars who are studying at Stanford have excellent streaming capacity from their dorm room. And so what we created was a mobile responsive site. So if you log on to the site and you minimize your screen, you can see what it looks like on a smartphone. It looks really beautiful on a smartphone. It works very well on a smartphone, but it will also work on your laptop. We did not go for an SMS solution because of the projection of smartphone penetration on the continent. So to use a Canadian illusion, we are sort of skating to the puck. We don't want to go where the puck currently is. We want to go where it's going to be, and it's going to be smartphones. And so we've sort of gone in that direction. If we were working with scholars living in more remote areas, we would need a different solution. But we've additionally adapted everything to be as low bandwidth as possible. So we know scholars are paying for their content. So instead of making everything flashy and interactive and beautiful, we are going for the lowest bandwidth adoption possible. We're also currently working on an Opera Mini integration because we've seen that lots of scholars use the Opera Mini platform because it throttles data. So it keeps them from using up all their data in one setting. The challenge for coding on that is that it changes the code dramatically. And so, we're consistently adapting to the different needs that we see, and those change in the marketplace constantly. And so we're trying to be adaptive to both what scholars need, what they aspire to, and what their realities are.
Great. So one last overarching question, and I think then we'll try to get to as many of the questions as we can from all of you that have been submitting. And hopefully some of the elements of what you've been asking have been covered in some of the questions you've already started with. Maybe if there's one kind of last cut to the chase to make sure we're covering what's been most interesting and surprising from all of your experiences. If you wanted to share one lesson from your project, what would it be?
Not just from our project, but also from this conversation here, and a number of people have written in around the gender issue and the women and men. And I think what's interesting and what's manifesting itself in this conversation is really that women and men do different things with technology. So I'm very curious in terms of RLabs, what is it that's drawing women to that platform and not drawing men? So is that, and you talked briefly about that men are maybe less interested in that helping out in their community. And so how do we address that in a broader sense? In several other people that I have spoken to over the last couple of days in conversation, women are using their tools. In our case, we have high points and low points. We have points where, for instance, in our online recruitment, people have to go through an online course, and women perform really well in those online courses. And then when we select them to come to the face-to-face, they're actually more shy and less engaged. And so we're trying to figure out how to tap into that, because we think it's really important when we talk about local content creation for both men and women to be creating content. Otherwise, it's just too one-sided. And it's not good if it's only women creating content, and it's not good if it's only men creating content.
So I think I would share lesson learned keeping users at the very center of design. We do interviews with scholars on a weekly basis, so we talk to at least 3 scholars every week, and that is both at Arizona State because we're a host partner, but also in all of the different locations. So Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, or Makerere University, or American University Beirut. And so we are really, really intent on finding out how and why scholars use what we have developed. And to sort of touch on Kathy's point, we actually see the opposite. We see a lot of males posting. Almost every other, well, more than every other post that you see is male, and that also carries through with our mentors. Most of the mentors posting are male, but females are more likely to comment or to like. And we're currently having an internal discussion around, is that good enough? Is it okay that females are sort of contributing to a discussion but not starting a discussion? Is that culturally appropriate? And so, like I said, we're keeping users at the center there. So we're constantly asking scholars, you know, why do you think this might be happening? What are your barriers? And so we're going to be doing a lot of research with females to say, hey, what do you think when you get on the site? So always keeping your users at the center of your plan, I think, is the biggest lesson learned.
I think from my side, it's really use appropriate tools. Don't make these kind of, and I think it goes back to the thing about putting the users at the center of what you're trying to do, trying to build. If whatever you are doing, if you see that whatever the people are going through and what they're doing does not need technology, then don't push technology. We actually, one lesson that we actually had a project where we implemented a technology solution and we realized it wasn't working for the people. And we actually stood it completely after spending all that time and energy into building a tech platform. So use appropriate tools. And for us, it was use, I mean, we see the rise of a lot of the social networks and messaging platforms which young people are using. If you are looking at solutions, try and find out how can you best utilize the things that they're already comfortable with, already using, instead of trying to kind of force them onto multiple platforms that is just not going to be appropriate for them.
Well, since our project is still a pilot project and we're really curious to see the final impact, I would say a lesson learned is that for us, partnerships were really important. We have a lot of different users, a lot of different stakeholders. But what I'm really curious to be able to learn and hopefully learn from others is how to longitudinally track users that have had exposure to technology and what the long-term impacts are from people that have exposure and introduction to technology long term, how that impacts their well-being, their job security on long term. So that's what I think we'd really love to be able to learn that and capture that.
Just to conclude, one thing that we learned from the project, especially working with young people, is that we are holding third-party information. So online safety is very important to maintain and to consider throughout the design process and also the implementing and rolling out the platform itself.
I'm glad that you raised that, because there was one question, I think, about, I mean, I think there's been a lot of talk about both the darkness and the light with regards to technology, and particularly, you know, I find this conversation coming up a lot about, first of all, finding credible information, especially if you're delivering education and training modules. How do young people develop the skills to be able to assess what's credible or not? And then maybe a second question, which is about just kind of security. You know, there's trade-offs, obviously, in giving up personal information. How do we help young people? And I realize this is more applicable to some of the models than others. Does anyone have any thoughts about those two issues?
Well, I can jump in. I think ASU has spent lots of time collectively in meetings with lawyers talking about personal information, personally identifiable information in a digital sense is even down to your name on a post. So it is a real and very serious issue. We worked with all of our partners to make sure that they were comfortable with the level of personal information that was being collected. All of our personal information is then de-identified. Users have user numbers. The personal information is stored on a secure server. And everything had to be in accordance with international law. So even though a scholar might be logging on in Uganda, the personal information has to be held in accordance with the strictest international law. So Canadians, you won the prize. You are the strictest international country for that. So we've been very careful about that. We're also working with scholars on the platform to train them about copyright. So posting on websites is just like writing a professional paper. You can't just post something as your own if it's not. And how much information they want to share and why. So that's definitely a major focus.
So when we were looking at the competencies that we aspire to promote within young people, we have a digital sort of bucket of competencies. And within that are two things that I think are really important to this discussion. One is media literacy. So how do you look at the media that you're looking at, and how do you judge its worth? How do you recognize bias? How do you go about getting different sources of information so you're not just basing your whole worldview on what comes into your Facebook feed, which is all based on things that you like? How to really bring in, especially if you're doing research, but just even if you're just trying to learn something, how do you know what's trusted? How do you know what are good sources of information? And how do you figure that out? And the other one is digital citizenship. And within digital citizenship, we have things where we're working with young people, because if we're going to promote digital skills and digital use in young people, we want them to be safe in how that they do it. So, working with them around what does their digital footprint look like, their personal information, the image that they're putting out online, who has access to it, how do you set privacy settings? All of those things are things that are sitting within that digital citizenship competency in DOT programs, and we don't have content that reflects all of it necessarily so far, but we are working towards providing more and more content all the time in those areas, and really drawing on third-party sources so that DOT can sort of, not that we're going to create the wheel, but that we would sort of vet it and curate it and then make it available to young people.
Any other thoughts? No? Okay. Let's see what other questions, and I encourage people to continue feeding questions. We'll see if we can, if your specific question has not been asked, it's because I'm making a snap judgment about whether we've sort of implicitly covered some of the issues you might be raising. So you can criticize me offline if you feel the need to. So I guess I have a question about, and I think you were speaking to this a little bit, Brooke, about the long-term trajectory of people after having participated in kind of one of these engagements. And so, I mean, you suggested, there's probably a need to do some sort of longitudinal work. Can you maybe, and maybe other people who can sort of speak to this, speak to like beyond the life cycle of the individual project, what would be some things to be looking for? What would be some ways to try to answer some of these questions? And how can those who are involved on the kind of the research end really focus their question on something that's more than just proving that this particular model had an effect? Like what is the thing that we want to learn about the long-term trajectory after having engaged with, digital platform, for lack of a better word?
Before I answer that specific question, I did just want to answer a couple of questions that were directed to me from the chat. So someone had asked whether or not any of our graduates had been placed, and we don't have our first cohort of graduates yet. So the reason I said before that I was interested in learning about this longitudinal data is because we don't have it yet. So we are expecting our first cohort, gosh, I think it's around 44 students will be graduating in August of 2017. So right now, everyone's still enrolled in the program. We don't have any graduates, and we have 0 job placements yet. So that was one very specific question. I think, and now to answer the question that you raised, so our project essentially ends in a year, which means that we're still going to have students enrolled in this program after the specific funding cycle from that the MasterCard Foundation has ended. I think what we're dedicated to doing is tracking our cohort of e-learners. We already have their information because they're registered. So the institutions that we're partnering with, the schools of nursing, already have the information of all the students, and we're trying to form a network of students to be able to track them to see how do you use your education it's not the natural assumption that all of them are going to immediately apply to a government advertisement and be a government registered nurse. There are other opportunities. They could potentially open their own clinic. They could work for a private hospital. So I really think it is, if the end goal of any one of our projects is to find youth gainfully and securely employed, then the research is twofold. It's how did you find your employment and what resources did you use to get there? And what we're learning from our youth is that they feel like technology could be an additional network. So, and that is part of our life skills curriculum, our planning, is that we do focus on job and career planning and placement. So I think it would be interesting to partner with research after projects end, after grants end, to somehow partner with research to do this type of longitudinal study, of which oftentimes it's incredibly difficult to build into a grant opportunity or a grant cycle. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I'll pass it on to some others.
I don't know. I mean, this is actually one of the challenges we've had trying to kind of do these longitudinal studies. Young people tend to change their mobile numbers quite frequently. I don't know if any of you have the same experience. So one of the things is just because there's no kind of loyalty around. For us, it was about your number, but for them that is irrelevant. And so 6 months down the line, you phone the same number, try and call it up, and it's a completely different person answering. Because in South Africa, at least, they do a lot of recycling of numbers after a certain period. And so that is, for us, has always been kind of one of the challenges of kind of keeping track. So you have to kind of go into trying to kind of track them on the Facebook accounts or on the, so you actually need people that actually kind of try and trace this person with a digital, wherever they're kind of finding themselves digitally, just to kind of get that kind of information. But one of the learnings from our side, at least, in trying to kind of keeping track of it and doing kind of some research around for many of them, kind of the technology exposure and being able to use some of our digital solutions was really just kind of the initial setting stuff. I think, especially with Zlata, what we found was that many of the young people then, because they've now been able to kind of engage and do work in their communities, they're actually now able to kind of have the confidence to go out and find a job, which was not really part of what we initially thought of. And that was part of the reason why we found that the notion of, and so there's also this thing about the study. The one thing I want to bring to our attention is that there's sometimes things that you never anticipated would transpire or happen. That was not really even the focus initially, that kind of emerged, that presents itself. And also kind of to kind of get and capture those kind of learnings, I think is going to be very, very useful. Because that was in our case. We created the digital asset after we realized that these young people wanted to tell people about the work that they're doing, but we didn't enable them to do that. And they said, oh no, but they want to tell people about it. And they want to have this, to share these bragging rights of stuff that they're doing and the great work that they're doing. So I think part of the notion, the two things for me is, one, getting back to finding out, getting hold of these young people is a challenge, and maybe someone can solve that problem. And secondly, also kind of trying to capture these other things that you've not anticipated in the research that kind of transpires out of these kind of projects.
I mean, measuring social capital has always proved to be a tricky thing. I think, let me just see if there are any other questions. If anybody's on the line, we have a bunch of questions. I think we've covered implicitly a lot of what's been covered. There are some very specific questions to individual projects, and I'm just wondering if we can cover them. So one is, I think this is an interesting question. It's directed at you, Brooke. The model is great, but I'd like to know your selection criteria and what makes you better than some other organizations to implement the same initiative. And I think this speaks a little bit to the transition period that you're now undergoing with the Zambian government. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that.
Sure. Thank you, Darius, for your question. So our selection criteria, so students apply to the schools of nursing. That's first and foremost. So they must first meet the academic criteria. And then the schools of nursing that we partner with, we work with them to figure out how many students they can bring on board for the e-learning cohort, because that right now are the cohorts that we're supporting. So students apply, and when they apply, they say, I want to be a regular student or I want to be an e-learning student. And right now, depending on the school, some schools have a streamlined enrollment period. So they're enrolling e-learning and regular students at the exact same time, and they have one enrollment per year. And some schools are staggering their enrollment. So if a student misses an opportunity to apply for the regular traditional face-to-face period, they can apply 6 months later to join the e-learning. So it really depends on the student, and it depends first and foremost on them meeting the academic criteria. And then secondly, for students who qualify, who have specific financial needs, we have a separate scholarship committee of which are members of each of the schools of nursing. And then we evaluate each applicant to determine whether or not they can receive a full or a partial scholarship. So that is our selection criteria. Right now, I'm not aware of any other organization that is doing this in Zambia. So right now, I think we're the only one that I know of. I could be completely off base or wrong, but that's doing an e-learning integrated platform to increase enrollment. And again, our model is a specific solution to a very specific need in partnership with the Ministry of Health and General Nursing Council. So we didn't really come up with this idea in isolation. We were all together thinking, how can we help schools of nursing enroll more students without automatically building new infrastructure? So without having to build more classroom space or more dormitories, which takes so much money and so much time, is there something we can do sooner that can help us reach some of these targets? And with the support of the government, you're telling me that if we can train more nurses, that there's jobs for them. So that's really the premise of our specific model. I hope that addressed your question.
So thank you very much. And unfortunately, that is the end of our webinar. We are over time, which is typical of webinars, I find. Anyway, I'd like to first of all thank all of our participants for getting up early in the time zone where we are in, and I'd like to thank all of you for logging in whatever time zone you logged in from, and for your excellent questions. We hope that you found this webinar and presentation to be stimulating, and we hope that the discussion continues. I should add that we will have the webinar fully recorded for those of you who are unable to hear some things, or if your network connection dropped out, we will make that available to you very shortly. And so with that, thank you very much and have a great day. End of it.